Hello and welcome to the Perry Connection. I'm your host, Jessie Barth. And with us in the studio is our guest, Linny Saunders.
Yes.
And you are the wife of a Perry native, and that would be?
Dwight
Saunders. So part of the illustrious Saunders family, certainly known and beloved and many talented individuals in that family. So you're visiting in Perry. You don't live here right now.
No.
And you, Linny, have a wonderful story. You have a wonderful family. Can you tell our audience about your family? You have a very special family.
We do. Dwight and I have been married this summer, 37 years. And we have the privilege of having 12 children. And 9 of them are adopted from all over the world.
All over the world.
Yep. And many of them have special needs. And we're actually in the process of adopting our baker's dozen.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So that we know exactly what you mean. But let's just talk a little bit about the beginning. Where did you meet Dwight? And just tell us about your background.
Okay. I grew up in Buffalo.
Okay.
And my husband, Dwight, grew up here. And he had transferred. He was attending a college in Ohio, and then he transferred to the University of Buffalo. And so we met in Buffalo, where I had grown up, and I was still in high school.
Oh, okay.
So we met and fell in love, and were married after a couple of years together.
Mm-hmm. And then did you go on to college?
Well, I did do some college,
Okay.
but Dwight was he was finishing his undergrad, and he started law school.
Okay.
And we got married. I ended up quitting school, and I put him through school.
Right.
So
I understand that.
yep.
Yeah.
So he was a lawyer for almost 11 years, and then he resigned from his practice, where he was very loved, and we packed everything up, including 3 kids at the time, and he went to seminary. And yeah.
And okay, and so did you meet in church by any chance?
Yes, we did.
I just had that feeling.
Yeah, we did.
So
We
you
did.
both had just a love of the Lord.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. What a bond.
Yes, it was a great bond.
And how did the whole idea of adopting special needs children and inviting them into your family, how did that evolve?
Well, when I was a little girl, I just had a heart set on adoption. And I wanted to adopt more than I wanted to even get married.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know it had to have been planted there by the Lord, because I really
Yes.
didn't know anybody who'd adopted internationally or anyway. And even the idea of special needs, it wasn't my heart cry at the beginning, but it became, as it kind of, over the years, it became just even more fine-tuned to adopting kids with special needs who desperately, not every child deserves to belong to somebody, but
Right.
special needs are often overlooked because of their needs.
Sure. Now tell me about your first 3 children. What are their names?
Abigail, and she's married and lives in California, and she's a photographer who flies all around the world taking pictures for people. And she has 3 little boys, and of those, 2 of them are also adopted.
Okay.
And then our next oldest is a son who's in the Special Forces, and he was adopted himself from Korea. And he has 2 children. He and his wife live in the Pacific Northwest. And then our third oldest, she and her husband, her name is Autumn. And
Okay.
they live in Colorado and have 1 little girl.
Okay. Wow. I'd like to see a picture and sort of a family tree.
Yeah.
Just to get the whole picture.
Yes.
Okay, so if a person is listening
Yes.
and saying, "Oh my gosh, I would like to do something like this," how did you go about the whole process of adopting, and how frequently did you do that? And how, I'm asking you a couple questions at what time, and when did you feel it was ready to adopt the next one? How much does the most current adoptee need to really feel centered? And
Well, Jessie, every situation is different. In the course of about 3 years, we brought home 4 kids.
okay.
And none of them were birth siblings, but they are siblings now.
Yes.
And every situation is unique. And some kids do probably require more time. We've kind of taken our time as we adopted. The 3 birth kids of ours are all kind of mixed up in the pile. There's not like we birthed 3 and then opened it like that. We didn't. We kind of just.
And how
whatever.
did you, were you involved with an agency, or did you just hear of someone that needed
Both.
a home? Okay.
It's happened both ways, and
Yeah.
it really has. We've adopted 2 from the United States, and the rest have been international adoptions.
Okay. And what countries? I
We-
mean, you have a United Nations
we
right
do,
there.
We do. We have Korea, Uganda, China. And so the China, that's where our 4th will be coming from. But we have 4 then will be from China, 3 from Uganda, 1 from Korea, and a couple from the United States.
Okay, good. And now Dwight, is he a pastor?
He was a pastor, but with our adoption of Ruby, who I wrote the book about, we needed to resign so that we could live near a major neurosurgical center because she needs to be in close proximity because her health is very fragile.
Okay, and so where did you move?
We
You
were
moved-
pastoring in Colorado, and
Okay.
it had a hospital, but it was just a smaller hospital. And so we ended up moving to Phoenix.
All
And
right.
so we live in Phoenix, where she has great medical care and an amazing neurosurgeon.
Good. And so you have written a book about Ruby, and we'll talk about that. And so now I'm just trying to get a feel for your day. So Dwight is home helping?
No. I mean,
No.
he does help, but we have a ministry we run now.
Okay.
And so it's called, surprisingly, International Voice of the Orphan. And
Oh,
it is,
beautiful.
we consider ourselves a voice for the voiceless. And that we have the privilege of representing millions of kids around the world who long for family, who long just for food,
Yes.
and long for medical care and somebody to call them their own, somebody to tuck them in at night.
Right.
So we have, in our ministry, we have a couple arms of it, and one of them is a feeding program, and we're very involved in that. And we feed meals to kids in India and in Uganda, and then we have a medical program that's called Ruby's Friends, and that is we raise money for either families who just can't afford medical care because maybe a brain surgery like Ruby's needed. They barely survive as it is, let alone the family feeding wise, let alone the burden of a brain surgery. So we raise money and call it Ruby's Friends. And then we have another arm is our daughter has a special needs home now. And so we help raise the money for the care of the kids. She has 26 kids in her care
Now,
in
is
Africa.
that Emma?
It is Emma.
Oh, all right. Dan Saunders, your
Yes.
brother-in-law,
Yes.
told me about Emma. All right. All right. Well, thank you for just giving us sort of the broad picture.
Yes.
And now let's just focus in on Ruby.
Okay.
And Ruby is your youngest
Yes.
at the moment.
Yep.
Okay. And this is the cover of a book that you've written,
Yes.
and it's on Amazon. And do we have it all in there? Good. And how's it doing?
It actually, believe it or not, was #1 in its category. I don't know if it is today. I haven't looked. My husband keeps me in.
Good. Have you done a lot of shows and getting lots of PR?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, maybe our Perry connection.
That just
We're all connected.
Yes.
That's why we called it that. Here's the book. And so if someone watching, can they buy it locally at Burlingham Books in Perry,
It is-
New York?
I don't think it is there yet. I think Dwight has talked about putting it there.
All right. But certainly anyone worldwide who
Yes.
sees this show on YouTube eventually can order it from Amazon.
Yes.
Isn't it wonderful? The world
Yes.
is so small.
It is.
And they can hear your story. And okay, so on the cover and on the other photo, we see Ruby. Now, can you just I don't know how easily it is to see her, but can you describe how Ruby was when Emma first saw her?
Yeah, it was June of 2011, and they were working in an orphanage that they've served in many times. And Emma has just, I mean, she has a passion for special needs kids. And so she made her way through the orphanage. She spotted one in the corner. It was a very darkened corner. And
In the orphanage. Now, how
Yes.
did she get there?
Dwight and Emma were leading a missions team.
Okay, and so, but I mean, did
Oh,
Ruby's
Ruby had been abandoned. I'm sorry. Yes.
had been abandoned?
Yes.
Where? Just on the street?
She had been abandoned in a garden in Africa.
Okay.
And a passerby, by God's divine
Oh.
grace, found her. And she was truly dying. And he scooped her up and he took her to the police station. And it is illegal in most, at least in the countries I know of, it is illegal to abandon a baby. And so
And this is Uganda we're
yes.
talking about in
and
Africa.
so he had taken, he took her to the police station. And in turn, the police took her to the orphanage where Emma found her.
Okay.
So, and she was over a year old, and she only weighed 6 pounds.
Okay. 6 pounds over 1 year old.
Yes.
All right. So what happened?
Well, Emma ran for my husband and said, "Daddy, Daddy." She was frantic. She said, "This one's dying," which was true. And she said, "You have to come see." So he immediately came, and they both were just unaware of what they should even do, just beside themselves. She was in desperate situation. The problem, Dwight and Emma knew immediately she probably had hydrocephalus. It wasn't diagnosed, but they went to the director.
Which an enlarged head.
Yeah, which is water on the brain. And went to the director, who is a very nice lady, and also really does care about the kids. Ruby's situation, though, is so highly specialized. You know, in a room full of 20 other kids the same age as her, she's not going to get the care she needed desperately to take care of her situation. Anyway, Dwight asked if he could take her for testing to see if she did have hydrocephalus, so she allowed him to do that. And so what it turned out eventually, by the time we brought her home to the States, we were able to look at the MRIs and see she does not just have one pocket of water. To have 2 is extremely rare. 3 is unheard of. But she has, at the time we brought her home, had over 12 places with water. So it's called multiloculated hydrocephalus. And it was causing her to throw up anything the orphanage did give her.
Okay, which would explain why she was so.
Well, she already was like that. It's just that she couldn't put on any weight anyway. And she was continuing to starve because, yeah. So, anyway.
So, let's fast forward. Ruby is now 5.
Yes, she's 5.
And what does she weigh?
She weighs 38 pounds.
38 pounds.
Yes, she
Good.
does. Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah. And so, okay, so we know that she certainly survived, that she's thriving
Yes.
under your loving care. And so she was in the orphanage for how long before then you came to get her? Is
Yes.
that right?
The director, Dwight and Emma, were there for 2 weeks, and that's all Dwight basically did, was advocate for care for her, ask volunteers to feed her. She required frequent feedings of tiny amounts because the pressure of the hydrocephalus in her brain, the untreated hydrocephalus, was causing her to vomit up anything they'd given her. So they would take tiny amounts very frequently. Every 15 minutes would be ideal. So anyway, they were there for about 2 weeks. And then when they were leaving, he had gone to the director many times about Ruby, but he said, "Please, please, we will do anything for you. Anything, anything, anything." Like, he went 3 times to make sure she understood anything. So by the time he had to go on, he and Emma went on to another African country and led another conference. And then by the time they landed in the States, there was an email waiting in his inbox. And because the doctors in Africa had said that in that week's time, they had told the director that there was no point in trying to work with her because her situation was too serious. So she wrote to Dwight by the time he landed, and she said, "You said anything. Did you really mean that? Would you be willing to adopt her?" And she actually said, "Would you be willing to adopt her and believe with me that God's going to heal her?"
Yes. Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Yes. And God does.
He does.
Yeah. And so then, did you go to Africa?
Yes,
to
I
get
did.
her? Okay.
It
With
took-
Dwight?
No, he stayed with the other kids
All right.
at home. So Emma and I went.
Okay.
And we were there about 7.5 weeks while we worked on the paperwork.
And was it love at first sight?
Oh, yes. But I was just struck with how tiny she still was. She was in a size 0 to 3 months because it was mostly her head. And her health was so fragile, just so fragile. So.
And the doctors had said that she would never A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Right, yes.
And so she is now, what you told me some things earlier
Yes.
that she's doing. Can you give us a list of
Yeah.
the power of love
Right.
when they said that she would
Yeah.
not be doing any of these
Right.
things? She is now.
Yeah, she does. She's not totally verbal, but she communicates with us. And so anyway, she says about 5 words. She signs about between 5 and probably 7 things.
And does she have a favorite word?
Her favorite word is friends.
Can you show us?
Yeah, she does this, and sometimes if she's not feeling great, she'll just do this. she's got her abbreviation. So anyway, but she loves people. Like, she just loves people. I'll be walking in a store, and if anybody even gives us a little bit of time, like, oh, your baby's cute. I'm like, would you like to meet her? Because I said she loves people.
She loves attention.
She does, and she loves people, and she'll squeal for them. She loves to play hide and seek. And if you say, Ruby, are you going to play hide and seek? She goes,
okay.
and she stays there, and then she'll wait until you say, where'd Ruby go? Where'd Ruby go? And then she puts her.
And she understands.
Oh, she totally understands. She's hysterical. Like, seriously, we laugh every day by stuff she does. If she was completely whole and healthy, as would be termed normal in the United States, we'd have to get our roller skates on, because this kid she's a spitfire. She's really just a bundle of fun.
Isn't it fun? And you were telling me that she's humming.
She hums.
Yes.
She hums over 20 songs. And they said, seriously, medical professionals said she would never do anything. And she has favorite songs, and almost anything she hears, in no time she will repeat.
Yeah. And you told me the first song that she hummed was?
Oh, How I Love Jesus.
Oh.
And that's what her daddy had sung in the orphanage over and over when he first found her. And just hundreds of times he would sing it to her. Tears would run down his face. He wanted her to live so badly. And that is the first song she sang.
Oh, beautiful. The power of love.
Yes.
And answered prayer.
Oh, answered prayer. It's
wanted her
totally
to
God's
live?
grace.
Yes.
It's totally God's grace. And his miraculous healing. He is a God who works miracles. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. I said, people today are skeptics, and they doubt that God cares about us as humans, let alone about a baby dying in an orphanage in a developing nation on the other side of the world.
Right.
Oh, but he does care.
Oh, yes.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that Ruby now has a following in that she is a poster child for
Yes.
cerebral palsy.
Yes, the United Cerebral Palsy Association in Arizona. She became their ambassador.
So she's now an ambassador.
Yes, she is.
You go, Ruby.
I know. Well, it is kind of really comical how God has just risen her up out of her dying place. And
Out of a garden.
Yep. And she is, an ambassador for United Cerebral Palsy. They had a gala, and they honored her because she was the ambassador. They came to our house. They filmed her doing therapies and interviewed me and interviewed her therapist. And that night she had a special dress on. Her little friend Patrick had picked out for her. She looked darling. And let me tell you, that chick knew the night was about her. And she squealed, and people were totally loved it. Well, they played that clip, which it was probably, 7 minutes long or so. I did not understand. I originally thought that the gala was honoring the employees. I did not realize it was a fundraiser.
really?
It just
Okay.
didn't even dawn on me.
Oh.
Didn't cross my mind. I was, I'm busy taking care of Ruby. No, these were some of the wealthiest people in the Phoenix area.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
so They saw the video clip, and then they had the UCP had Ruby stand. Of course, we lifted her up because she is, she has quadriplegic cerebral palsy. So anyway, we lifted her up so that they could see her, and there were really very few dry eyes, and they gave her a standing ovation. It was dark, and it was precious, and people said, no, they don't usually do standing ovations. It was a great. Who would have guessed? Who would have guessed? Yeah.
Well, maybe there'll be a movie.
Oh, I don't know. That would be so cool.
Well, now tell me about your other children.
Okay, so the three oldest, Abigail, Tyler, and Autumn. Then is Emma, and Emma is married, and she just got married a couple months ago. She is the one who found Ruby, and her heart was called when she was 6.5. She was praying one night and said, God, please let me be the one you pick to go take care of the orphans in Africa, as though there was a long waiting line, and he would have to decide who would be deemed okay to take care of them. So anyway, we actually have run video when she was on her 8th birthday saying that she was moving to Uganda to take care of the orphans.
Yeah.
And so by the time she was 14, we began to take her because we wanted to fan the flames.
So now, so as part of your organization, do you have an orphanage in Africa?
Yes, and it's hers, and that's the GEM Foundation. She believes that all of them are precious gems from the heart of God.
Yes.
So she moved there when she was 19. By the time she was 19, we had taken her 12 times. So that she was very familiar with the country, that had established some friendships.
And what language do they speak?
Lugandan, but most of them speak English. So
They do,
she knows some Lugandan now. She's not fluent yet, but she is learning it fairly well. And so she has lived there 2.5 years, and she began immediately to pursue opening a home for special needs kids. And in the city of Kampala, which is I think about 3.5 million people, there is no such thing. So Emma, she crossed every I, or dotted every I, crossed every T. She didn't do bribes. She just kept working away, believing that God had called her to do this. And now the city of Kampala actually uses her home as a model home. And they will bring city officials to see her home because it's run as a home for any child.
And what does that home look like? How many rooms?
It's
how many
actually
bedrooms?
an old school.
Okay.
And she rents it. They're looking for property because they're going to build. But it's got, it's probably about 9 rooms. Not all of them are occupied with kids, but there's 26 kids. And there's severe needs. Quite a few with hydrocephalus, feeding tubes, many with cerebral palsy, severe,
So how many are on staff?
She has 28 people working for her.
Okay, so she's not only taking care of the children, but giving employment.
Yes. Yeah. So, and everyone who
setting a
works for her
model.
is Ugandan. And she has regular trainings to teach because, see, a lot of developing nations, third world countries, do not believe that special needs kids are valuable. And many are actually thought to be cursed. And so it's really a mindset of that it's working at changing so that people understand the value, that they didn't do something wrong to deserve this child. Instead, we live in a broken world, and sometimes genetics, produce broken bodies, and that's not anybody's fault. It's just how life works. And our only responsibility is to care and love them and treat them as fragile little human beings, which they are.
I just actually looked up the root of the word dignity today. And what you're doing is you see the dignity of each individual.
Yes.
And the root of the word dignity is worth. Isn't that interesting? And to think that, we think it's being dignified, but it's really being worthy, and that we all are worthy, and we all are gems.
Yes.
Yes,
I think at least when I was growing up, and I know it's across the board, that there are certainly people who have not understood that and not maybe been taught that any one of us could even have an accident and suddenly be in need of, round-the-clock care, and that we still have value. God created each person because He loves them. And so anyway, Emma's home. So Emma, our 4th oldest, lives in Africa, and she just got married. She's in the process of adopting a little boy.
And how wonderful her husband.
Yes. He just joined her. He was dating her before she moved. He's actually the brother of our oldest daughter's husband. So 2 sisters married 2 brothers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he knew what he was getting into.
Yes, he did.
You better watch those Saunders because you're going to end up
Yeah, you might end up.
giving.
Yeah. So anyway, that's Emma is in Africa, and she has the GEM Foundation. And so we take missions teams 4 times a year at least. And we work and serve with the treasures that she has. And we are going to be building buildings there. They're in the process of looking for land, and they'll be building facilities. She's going to call it GEM Village.
Nice.
And that way they will have more room for more kids. And it will be all the way, the care will go from whatever age they're brought until they someday go to be with the Lord.
Okay, wow. So that's
So
lifetime.
Yes. So there will be like group homes as they get older.
Right.
And she has this huge vision that's obviously only from the Lord.
Yeah.
So,
Now, okay, so I don't want to leave anyone out in the family.
okay, so that's the 4th. And the 5th is Graham, and he also is married.
Okay.
And he is, recently, they've been married a year, and he and his wife live in Phoenix. And he works, she's in nursing school, and he works at a corporation in their designing apps for the phone.
Okay.
So, and he's very gifted. And they both have been on, actually all of our kids have been on missions trips. And we just really think that that's very important as they're growing up. Yeah. So then the 6th is Liberty, and she is at home. So she's the oldest at home. She's 16. And this past winter, we had the privilege, she goes to Africa all the time. She believes God's called her to work with Emma.
Okay.
And so she'll be moving there. And
do you homeschool?
I do.
Okay. Wow.
So but Liberty is going to, she was this summer, or winter, she was there. She had gone with Dwight on a team, and we decided that maybe it would be really nice for her to just stay there until the wedding, and we would bring her back. So we proposed that to Emma and Liberty, and they're BFFs anyway. And so then their hashtags on Instagram and Facebook were all best parents ever. Which after this many kids, I know. I was like, we got that hashtag. We arrived. So anyway, so Liberty is the oldest at home. And then we have Jubilee and Nehemiah and Isaiah and Elizabeth and Elijah and Ruby.
Oh.
And the next one we're bringing home is John Wesley. He's in a wheelchair. We joke that Ruby thinks she wins all the wheelchair races because she has no competition. So John Wesley has cerebral palsy, and he's in a wheelchair. So now she'll have competition.
And where is he coming from?
China.
From China.
And he's 13.
And how did you find John Wesley in China? Do you have people that contact you and say?
No, I saw it on an advocacy group on Facebook.
Okay.
And I just was smitten with him. And amazingly, right in that time frame, a lady wrote to me and said, would you be willing to advocate? Because I have a blog. And so I write, people around the world read. And so she knew that there was a chance, at least, that if we put it on the blog, maybe somebody would see it who was looking for a son who was 13 in a wheelchair. And I wrote to her back and I said, this is mum's the word, but we're actually trying to bring him home to us. And she had been advocating for him for a long time, and she wrote me back and said, I'm sitting at my computer sobbing. So I just met her last week.
Oh.
We're on the trip across the country.
Special.
Yeah.
Very special.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all the kids at home.
And I do hope that you can send a photo of the whole family. Do you have a
I do.
photo?
I do. From Graham's wedding. Now, Emma has not ever been home since she moved to Africa, but we're holding up a large, like a life-size frame of her. We are. And her little boy. She wasn't married yet, so her husband's not in the picture, but her and her little boy are in the picture.
Okay. Great. So that we can just see that.
Yeah, I would
Ever
love that.
expanding.
Yes.
You know, you could almost have a reality show. TV show.
People have said that. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
We have had a lot of things happen in our lives that I think people would find very interesting. But
Can you share just one example of what you're talking about?
we lost our home in a fire. And not everybody has done that. And we lost
Wow.
everything. And Dwight was out of town, and the kids and I were all sleeping, and a smoke alarm woke us up by God's grace that had been fixed the day before.
Oh my gosh.
Not kidding. I am a huge advocate for smoke alarms, and I ask people all the time, do you have one? And I will drive one to anybody, anywhere, nearby me that is without one, because it's just, it is literally what God used to save our lives. And we had just had it fixed the day before.
And so did you smell, or you
The
heard
smoke
it,
alarm went off. Yeah.
and everybody just immediately got it?
No, because and a lot of them were little. We had just brought home Elijah and Elizabeth. They were 1 and 2 at the time. So anyway, yeah, I thought it was probably just broken. I thought what the man who had fixed it was built into the house. It was a system in the house. I thought he just needed to come and fix it again.
So you moved everyone out. You got everyone out.
We did.
And you
By God's
lost
grace,
the
we
house.
lost everything.
Everything. So what happened? How did you?
Well, we had to find it. We stayed at a friend's house who was out of town. They opened their home to us. They were gone, which was great. Our son had to have emergency surgery the next day. He had Graham had to have his appendix out. The next day after that, we found out our dog died. It was like a really crazy time. And then we had to find a hotel big enough for us. And so the community we lived in was relatively small. So we ended up in 2 rooms down the hall and around the corner from each other.
Wow.
And we were in that for about 7 weeks until we found a rental that was big enough, because we were in the process of bringing one of our kids home, and we didn't want the country to say, that's not going to work because our home study.
Right.
So anyway, we eventually got into a rental. Then they bulldozed what was left of the house, and we rebuilt another house in a similar place on the land we had.
Great.
Yeah.
So you just always thrive in the face of
Well, God
adversity?
has always been good to me.
Yes.
Always. He is a good God.
Yes.
And He has always been faithful.
Always.
Life can present bumps and turns that we don't expect, but there's one thing: He is always faithful. Life isn't always fun. It wasn't always meant to be fun. But God is always good, and He is always faithful.
Always.
Yes.
Good. Well, and what a faithful daughter you are.
Well, I love Him. He really, I would not be who I am if it was not for Him.
Well, and that's obvious. And God is love, and we are all created to express that love. And you and Dwight and your beautiful family and extended family, you certainly have felt that from the Saunders and Mark Saunders. I'm just wondering, has having Mark, who is a special needs individual in your family, do you think that had made any impact on?
I do think it influenced. I really do. And I know it influenced Emma.
Yeah.
And I know Dwight was open to. We have some of our kids, Ruby, for instance, another one of ours, Jubilee. They're what we call lifers, and they will be with us for life. And we always pictured Mark with us. He prefers being in a home here near Perry, but that's okay. We always had pictured him with us, and so we're okay with that. We think empty nesting sounds rather boring for us.
I don't think that's ever going to
No.
be in your cards.
No, I don't think so. In
That's
fact, Dwight
wonderful.
jokes around with people. People say something about, you have a big family. He's like, we're almost empty nesters. We only have 7 at home.
Yeah. Well, just more opportunity.
Yes.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming and sharing your inspirational story and your love of God's children and just the international family. It's just beautiful.
Well, thank you, Jessie, very much.
And thanks for being in Perry. And let's just look at the book one more time. Rescuing Ruby, just one of the many gems.
Yes.
And we thank you for joining us. And thank you again, Lynn.
Thank you.
And best wishes to you and your family.
Thank you very much.